Hello everyone, Mason here, back with another book review. Today I'm going to be talking about The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I'm going to start off by sharing some of my spoiler-free thoughts about The Midnight Library and then move on to spoilers later on. Timestamps in the description. A quick trigger warning before I dive into this review. The Midnight Library deals with mental health issues such as loneliness, depression and suicide. If you feel like this may be a little bit too hard to listen to, I understand, and there are other reviews available. Despite the trigger warning that I just gave, personally, I didn't find this book depressing. It centres around a 35-year-old woman called Nora Seed. Nora is not in a good place. Her relationships with the people in her life are strained. She's lonely, she loses her job, and finally, a personal tragedy tips her over the edge. After an attempted suicide, Nora finds herself in the Midnight Library, a place that exists between life and death, with books containing the infinite variations upon Nora's life that she will get to try out and experience what life could have been like if she had or hadn't made certain decisions. It seems weird to say, but despite the subject matter, I actually had a really good time with the Midnight Library. Was it sad? Yes. Did I feel sorry for Nora? Yes. Did it make me reflect on the mistakes I may have made, regrets that I have, and how things could have been different? Yes. But despite this, there was actually some overwhelmingly positive messages in the Midnight Library. It's a reflective, introspective book that will make you consider the impact that you have on the world around you, the people in your life. It'll make you question whether the regrets that you have are even worth having in the first place, and whether if you'd done things differently, the outcome would really be as desirable as you hope or fear it may have been. Don't get me wrong, the first portion of the story is genuinely sad. I found Nora quite likeable and very relatable, so it's genuinely moving to follow her around as life just kicks her about as she unravels and becomes more and more desperate. But as with most things that are difficult, if you just go the distance, you'll find that Nora's story is rewarding and has some valuable things to teach. I don't want this review to come across as if the Midnight Library is all sadness though. Despite the fact that Nora is in a very dark place, I found parts of this story properly funny. Nora as a character is sarcastic, a little bit awkward, earnest, intelligent and empathetic. Each time she tried a new life, I found myself genuinely hoping that this one was the one for her, the one that made her properly happy. I'm glad that I experienced this story via audiobook. It's not like I had much choice, I couldn't exactly go and pick up the physical copy, but I loved the narration provided by Carey Mulligan. Whether it's a tone of hope or happiness, sadness or anger, or even something as simple as the awkward little laughs provided at the end of jokes that Nora makes, the way Carey Mulligan narrates the Midnight Library made Nora Seed feel like an actual person, not just a character. I wanted to be Nora's friend, and not out of pity, but because she seemed like a nice person, like someone who would genuinely be a friend worth having. Whilst this was the first book I've read by Matt Haig, I doubt it'll be the last. I was impressed by the fact that each new life that Nora tried felt real to me. It was like Matt Haig had lived that life and knew exactly how it would feel to be inside it. I'm eager to get to spoilers, so I'm going to cut a long story short. The Midnight Library was great. It's got an intriguing and original concept unlike anything that I've come across before, with a main character that was more likeable and relatable than any character in any book that I've read in a long time, who goes on a journey that was definitely worth reading. It's got some great insights, some humorous and moving moments, and I would genuinely recommend it. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, and whilst I understand that it might not be for everyone, I loved it. Now, let's move on to spoilers. To anyone who's leaving now, thanks for your time, take care, have a good one. There's so much to unpack here when it comes to spoilers, but one of the things that really stands out to me is that I love the way that Matt Haig introduces us to all of the lives that Nora is going to lead and then delivers upon them. Pretty early on, we learn that she regrets leaving the labyrinths because this is the root cause of her problems with her brother Joe. She regrets not going to Australia with Izzy, not becoming a glaciologist, not being a mother. These are her biggest regrets, and they are the lives that we explore in most depth. Throughout the book, things get mentioned that we become familiar with. Like the National Geographic magazine with a black hole on the cover that Nora says is a visual metaphor for how she feels inside. Like the pictures of the humpback whales that Izzy sends her in every life except her root life until the very end, like her brother's boyfriend. I actually really liked that Joe was gay, but it was so downplayed. It wasn't this giant neon flashing sign advertising how inclusive the story was. It was just there. It was just normal. Nora has known he's gay for a long time. She never explicitly needs to say that he is because she already knows it. It's normal to her, and she doesn't need to spell it out for the audience, and I really appreciated that. I loved the way that these things we become familiar with get explored and unpacked one by one. She tries the life where she opens a pub with Dan, except in that life Dan doesn't appreciate her. He mocks her, he talks to her like dirt, he cheats on her. And after that, she realises that he was never actually as nice as she remembers him being, that she's been giving him too much credit, and after that, the regret falls away. She tries the life where she actually went to Australia with Izzy, except in that life, Izzy dies. And Nora is left feeling the same way she feels in Bedford, but in Australia instead. And so she realises that despite the fact that she may not be best friends with Izzy anymore, Izzy's at least still alive, and that regret falls away. One by one, she tries to undo her biggest regrets and realises that they're not worth having. In the life where she tries to fix things with her dad by sticking at swimming and actually making it to the Olympics, her dad doesn't appreciate her efforts, and in fact he throws it back in her face by cheating on her mum, and her mum dies years earlier than she should have. In the life where she stays in the labyrinths, the band that Joe resents her for leaving, they make it big, and Joe becomes addicted to drugs and alcohol and dies of an overdose. In the life where she becomes a glaciologist, she almost gets eaten by a polar bear, and that's the moment where she realises that she doesn't actually want to die. Even when she asks for a gentle, simple life, Matt Haig still pays off on something that he introduced earlier in the story. She ends up dating the boy that she saw running past the window while she sat playing chess in the school library. In my opinion, this is a fantastic message. Matt Haig is telling us to not bother having regrets because we can't anticipate the outcome of our actions, and just because we believe that the alternative decision would lead to a desirable outcome doesn't necessarily mean that it would. If you live your life for other people, trying to please them, doing what they want you to do, they may not even appreciate the efforts that you make, the sacrifices that you make in their best interests. So it's best just to live life for yourself. I also really like that Matt Haig seems to have a good idea of what the reader will think. I listened to The Midnight Library with my partner, and she jokingly said that Nora should just pick the life where she keeps Voltaire as an indoor cat instead. And not long afterwards, Nora does just that. Except it turns out that Voltaire was destined to die on that day because he had a heart problem, and although Nora assumed that he'd been hit by a car because he's found dead at the side of the road, really Voltaire just knew his time was up and went outside because he didn't want Nora to see him die. I thought it was clever that Matt Haig anticipated the sarcastic joke and delivered upon it, showing us why it's not that simple. I think it's fair to say that certain elements of The Midnight Library are predictable, but I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing. Throughout the story, I was expecting a life where she chose to have a coffee with Ash to be the one where she was happy, and it was. She ends up happily married to him and they have a daughter, and this actually ends up being the last life that she lives before choosing her own root life, which both me and my partner both thought she was going to end up doing. Here's the thing though, I don't necessarily think it's as simple as Nora being happy because she's married and has a kid. For a start, she's with Ash, a man who in her root life she's gotten along with quite well on multiple occasions, who once asked her for a coffee and was nice enough to take time out of his day to help her bury her dead cat, despite the fact that he doesn't really even know her that well. And in their life together, he's nice, he's simple, he's safe, he's a man that helps other people, he's good to her and he's good to their daughter. In that life, she also has a good relationship with Joe. Throughout the book, Nora comes to assume that the only lives in which her and her brother have a good relationship are the lives in which she makes him money, but that turns out to not necessarily be true. Despite the fact that in that life she still left the labyrinths, they have a good relationship. He's nice to her, he's nice to her daughter. It's not being married and having a child that makes Nora happy in that life. It's having people around her that care about her, that love her, and she doesn't feel like she has that in her root life. On the other hand, despite feeling like this is the life for her, Nora never forgets her root life, which the Mrs. Elm in The Midnight Library has told us she will when she finds her perfect life. And that's when we get the payoff to the repeated phrase that has appeared throughout the book. Never underestimate the big importance of small things. In my opinion, the last section of the book says a lot about what kind of person Nora is. She starts off the story thinking that no one cares and she doesn't make a difference to anybody. But in that life where she's so happy with Ash and Molly, she starts to realise that she hasn't been around to do the small things that make a big impact on other people. She wasn't around to help her neighbour with his shopping and his medication, so he's had to go and live in a care home where he's unhappy. His beautiful garden is an overgrown mess. The young lad that she teaches piano to hasn't had music in his life to give him something to focus on, to stop him from getting involved with the wrong crowd, and she sees him getting arrested. She starts to realise that life isn't just about her happiness. She's not the centre of the universe, and after that she knows that she has to go back to her root life. Even then, it's not that simple. She can't just slip back into her old life as easily as she slipped into her alternative lives. She has to fight for it. With the Midnight Library in flames, she has to struggle to find her old life so she can get back to it. And even then, it's not that simple. Because it's not like the actions that she took are erased. She still tried to kill herself, and she has to deal with the consequences of having done that. She still might die. She has to struggle outside to the neighbour that she's helped in the past and hope that he can help her. Although it was always fairly obvious that Nora was going to end up back in her root life, I don't think that that's a bad thing. Not at all. She couldn't just slip into one of her other lives, with her actions having no consequences. Things aren't that easy. It wouldn't have sent the right message. In my opinion, the whole point of the Midnight Library is to explain that it's never too late. All she had to do was reach out to Joe, reach out to Izzy, and that began the process of rebuilding their relationships. She begins to appreciate the big importance of small things. Sure, she can't be a world-famous rock star, but by providing piano lessons, she can make a difference by spreading the joy of playing music to the people that need that in their lives. She starts to play chess on a regular basis with Mrs. Elm, making time for a lonely woman who once did the same thing for her when she needed it. She starts to volunteer for and donate money to causes that she cares about. In short, she realises that it's never too late. Never too late to make that change, to reach out to that person. Hope is never lost. The game isn't over until all the pieces are off the board. In my opinion, that's a great message to send, and it's well delivered. I'm properly glad that I decided to listen to the Midnight Library. As I said earlier, I was nervous to do so at first, because I get anxious about death and what comes afterwards. Seeing so many people say that it was a depressing tale almost put me off, but I'm genuinely glad that it didn't, because I didn't think that it was depressing. Maybe it's because I've never been that low. I've never been so desperate that I haven't wanted to live anymore. And maybe if I had been in that position, listening to the Midnight Library might not have been so enjoyable. I'm not saying that anyone who did find it depressing is wrong, but personally, for a book that explores loneliness, not knowing your place in the world, feeling like you have nothing left to live for, the Midnight Library was surprisingly humorous, inspiring, hopeful, and actually quite insightful. I felt that Matt Haig had some beautiful things to say, and he's definitely made my Book of Regrets a little bit lighter. I hope you've enjoyed today's review. If you have, say hi in the comments section and we'll have a chat. Then like and subscribe so that you don't miss any future content. As always, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to me ramble on. I'll see you next time, guys. Until then, take care. I'm off, and you should have a good one.